So should you buy or lease your car? Well, today I'm going to share my story of how I leased a car for less than $60 a month. And today we're going to break down the math between purchasing or leasing a car to help you know how to answer this question. Let's go. Well, man, this is an age-old question of whether or not you should purchase or whether you should lease your car and what's most beneficial in the long run. And today I'm going to share my story of how I leased a 2017 Toyota Corolla for less than $60 a month. And we're going to help equip you to break down the math and determine what is best for you and your situation. And first, let me get a couple things out of the way. Number one, I am not advocating for a car payment or having a lingering monthly payment. I am advocating for you to know how to run the numbers and find what works best for you. And number two, it's vitally important that you understand the difference between what you can afford and what you should afford. Even though you might be able to squeeze that $200 a month payment in your budget, doesn't mean that you should. And number three, my story is completely out of the ordinary and is not normal. So before we dive into my story, let me break down what goes into a lease in less than 45 seconds. So a car lease is basically a long-term rental agreement, and usually these last around 36 months. Not only that, in the agreement, you've been given an allotted amount of miles that you're allowed to drive during your lease. Usually, if you drive over that, it's between 15 and 20 cents per mile. So 1,000 miles is an extra $200 at the end. Not only that, you do not own the car outright. The dealership will continue to hold the title for the car. Additionally, within your lease agreement, you've been given the option to purchase the car at the end of your lease, and this is called the residual value, or what you have to pay to own the car at the very end. Not only that, when you're paying taxes for a lease, you're only paying taxes on the total amount of payments, so not the total amount of the car. So there's some tax breaks potentially there. So when you're comparing your lease agreements and looking at leases across the board, you're ultimately asking, what's the monthly payment? What's the down payment, if any? How many miles do I get? And what's the residual value or the cost of the car at the end of the loan? And that's how you compare what goes into a lease. So now that you understand what goes into a lease, I'll kind of tee up my story and say, number one, I never thought in a million years that I would do a car lease. I'd heard from financial people all the time that leasing a car is one of the worst decisions that you can make financially. It just doesn't make sense. Not only that, I just heard horror story after horror story of people going over on their miles and owing hundreds, if not thousands of additional dollars just because of how much they drove their car during their lease. But before we dive into how I got a Toyota Corolla for less than $60 a month, I want to set the record straight. This video is not sponsored by Toyota. However, it is sponsored by the like button, so make sure you take 2 seconds and hit the like button now. See, prior to this lease, I had never worked with a dealership before. I had always sold and bought cars private party, and I probably bought and sold probably 6 to 10 cars up to this point in my life. But we'd heard that one of the dealerships near us was getting ready to move, and they were trying to move their product as fast as possible, and it was the end of year sales. So we said, hey, let's go check it out. My wife was in need of a car, and we said, let's just go see what the numbers might be. So we walked into the dealership and we started talking to them about what inventory they had available for their used cars and what they were running specials on. And the sales rep kept talking to us about a Toyota Corolla lease, and he said, hey, this is going to be one of the best deals we have going on today. So we started the conversation, and to be honest, I was blown away. I was blown away at how bad the numbers were. We started the process and with a quoted $239 a month with $2,000 down and a $10,900 residual at the end. So just to do some quick math on that, over 3 years, we'd pay $8,604. We'd have a $2,000 down payment and then an option to buy the car at the very end for $10,900. This brings us to a grand total of $21,504. So knowing that we'd pay over $21,000 for a car that has a sticker price of $18K, we decided, hey, we need to go back to the drawing board because this wasn't going to work. So we kept looking at other options. We were looking at some of the used cars, and they kept bringing us back to this Toyota Corolla. And finally, they offered us $149 a month with no money down. We still ran the numbers. I was like, man, this is awesome. We talked them down almost $100 from their starting price. This might be a good deal. But as we kept crunching the numbers, we kept saying, man, this just doesn't make sense for what we're getting and how how much it would cost in the long run because we really were thinking, hey, we want to buy this car outright. And so we said, hey, we need to keep looking, and we just weren't ready to make a decision. Now, one financial hack I'd encourage you to embrace for your life is to never make large financial decisions in the same day. So often, some of the worst mistakes that you can make financially are tied up in emotions that you get excited about that car you're looking at, the house you're seeing, or the dress you're trying on. And no matter what it is, your emotions can get wrapped up in it and you can make a bad decision. And so for me and my wife, we knew, hey, we're just looking today and we were not going to buy a car because this was one of our golden rules that we try to live by and say, we are not making big decisions in one day. Let us sleep on it. We'll come back. So at this point, we had told the sales rep, hey, we're not making a decision today. My patience was running thin. I was ready to be done with this car buying experience and thought, man, this is why we always go private party. And sure enough, he said, hey, let me talk to my manager one more time and see what the best deal I can get you, which I thought we already had that. So he comes back to us and he says, hey, we can give you $99 a month, 36,000 miles, and we'd even throw in 2 years of oil changes for the car. So me and the wife, we sat down, we ran the numbers, we looked at how much it was going to cost, how much we wanted to fit into our budget, and more specifically, the fact that we could just pay that total amount if we wanted to. And we said, hey, this feels comfortable for us. And we said, let's start looking at the paperwork. And so let me start to unpack how we ended up actually only paying $57 a month. So number one, we asked what would we pay over the 3 years for this car? And the payments ended up breaking out to a total of $3,564. Additionally, with the oil change credits of roughly $180, we ended up landing at $3,384 to be able to have this car for 3 years and not worry about maintenance whatsoever. Additionally, we knew that we wanted or were thinking about buying the car at the end and we're looking at the residual value. So we started looking at how much a Toyota Corolla that was 3 years old was worth. And as we started looking at the numbers, really the $10,900 residual value or the cost to buy it at the end seemed pretty appropriate for a 3-year car for a Toyota that was similar to what we were buying. And we said, hey, even if at the end of the loan, if we wanted to buy the car, we think that the value is there, that if we wanted to sell it, if we wanted to keep it, that we wouldn't find ourselves completely upside down if we were purchasing the Toyota at the end of the lease. So after running the numbers, after looking at our situation and really looking at not just what we could afford, but really what we wanted to fit into our lifestyle and what worked for us, we didn't want to have all the stresses attached with maybe fixing up an older car like I'd been doing the years prior. And we said, hey, the numbers make sense. We can absolutely afford this, and it just even makes sense in the long run if we wanted to purchase the car outright at the very end. And so we said, hey, let's sign the papers. We felt like the $3,384 was worth it in the end. The $99 a month payment was completely fine with us. And we said, hey, let's pull the trigger and let's see where this journey takes us. So you may be thinking to yourself, Clyde, this feels like clickbait. You're saying your monthly payment's $99 a month, but then you're saying it's also less than $60. Which one is it? And that's where things got interesting for our story. So we were paying $99 a month, and as our lease was coming to an end, we had 1 or 2 more months left. We had a dealership reach out and say, hey, we wanted to purchase your car. And we were like, hey, we don't actually have the title on it. It's just a lease. And they said, well, hey, bring it in and let's see what we'll give you for it. So we brought it in and they offered us a value of just over $12,000, 200 and some change. And we said, man, with a residual value at $10,900, there's definitely some opportunity for us to be able to get rid of the car and actually make some money back. And that's exactly what we did. We worked with Toyota, we worked with this other dealership, and this dealership ended up writing us a check for $1,351. So after paying $99 a month for a total of $3,384 after subtracting the $180 oil change, and then also we received the check from the dealership buying the car that we never actually owned. They wrote us a check for $1,351, bringing us to a grand total of $2,053 that we spent over 36 months to drive a brand new Toyota Corolla, bringing us to a grand total of $57 a month. So we asked the question, was it worth it? Was it worth spending roughly over $2,000 to drive this brand new car for 3 years and then have nothing to show for it? And my answer is yes. Kinda. See, it's yes because it was great being able to drive the car. It was great not having to worry about maintenance, all the stresses attached with maybe driving an older or used car. And so there was a lot of benefits along the way. I love the safety features. And once again, there was a lot of positives. But once again, I walked away after 3 years spending just over $2,000 and had nothing to show for it. So in the end, was it worth it? Yes. Kinda. However, I want to say even in the midst of my story, It is not normal. These numbers that they quoted and the deal they gave us was completely out of the ordinary. I have multiple friends that work in the car industry, and when I tell them that we paid $99 a month with no money down for 36,000 miles with a really great residual at the end, they look at me and they say, "How did you get that deal?" And my response is, favor ain't fair. And so, hey, I just want to tell you that that is not a normal story. But what I want to help you do is be able to look at the numbers and be able to break down what's going to make sense for you as you answer this question: should I buy or should I lease a car? So for us to be able to crunch this numbers, we have to make sure that we're working with apples to apples. So we're going to be looking at the total cost to purchase a car as well as the total cost of the lease and the purchase, because we want to be able to look at both of these numbers and see what the delta or the difference is to see what's most beneficial for you. So in our purchase example, we're going to be looking at a 2000 Honda Civic that sticker price is at $22,000. We're also going to be using an average interest rate of 4.25%, which is pretty average when it comes to used or new cars. So this ultimately breaks down to a monthly payment of $408 a month over 60 months, which means you'll ultimately pay a total of $2,459 in interest. So working through the purchasing equation is pretty simple. Over the 60 months, you're going to end up paying $24,459 to be able to own that car that was originally worth $22,000. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So now we'll look at a lease deal for a 2020 Honda Civic, looking at what we'll ultimately pay over the life of the lease as well as the buyout. So when we start looking at these numbers, one of the common numbers I found was that a car like this would be $250 a month for 36 months, meaning that we would ultimately pay $9,000 over the 3 years for this payment. Additionally, there would be a $2,000 down required to be able to get in this lease. And then lastly, there would be a purchase option at the very end for $13,053. So once again, since we're looking at purchasing this car, we need to be able to look at what it's going to cost us to be able to purchase the car and the total interest for the remaining portion of that. So then we look at the loan for $13,053 at the 4.25% over 60 months, which means that we would have another monthly payment of $242 a month for 60 months, and we would have a total cost of $14,512 over the 5 years of that loan. So for us to be able to calculate the total amount of the car lease, it's going to be $2,000 down. We're spending $9,000 over the life of the lease. And then additionally, we're going to spend $14,512 for the loan, including all the interest rates, bringing our absolute total for the lease and the purchase to $25,512. So how do we answer that question of whether or not we should buy or should we lease? I mean, we can look at the numbers and see that we would ultimately pay less in the long run for the car purchase versus going the lease route. However, there is the lower monthly payment, and so that is something that usually gets people. They think, hey, I can afford the $240 or the $250 a month for the next 8 or 9 years. But no matter what, this is what's important, that you're breaking down the numbers. You're looking at what you're going to spend in the long run to be able to purchase and drive this car. So you may be asking the question, is there really no right or wrong way to be able to purchase or lease a car? And this is what I'll tell you. Auto Transport Direct did a recent study and found that within the first 3 years, cars will depreciate by 48% of their value. So that means that Honda Civic that was originally $22,000 will actually have an estimated value of $13,000 after 3 years. So you tell me, is it worth spending the $22,000, $25,000, or the $26,000, depending on what method you go, to be able to have a car within 3 years will be worth almost half that amount? So should you lease or should you buy? I think it's important that you crunch the numbers, you take depreciation into account, and really ask the question, is it worth the amount that we're going to spend in the long run for this vehicle, and thinking about the value that it'll have in the next 3 or 5 years to say, yes, we should go this route. So for me, in my personal opinion, I think if you're looking for the most cost-effective way to drive and purchase a vehicle is number one, cash, if I'm being really honest, and number two, purchasing a car that's at least 3 to 4 years old so that you're not taking the massive depreciation hit on the front end for a brand new vehicle. See, one of my financial mentors when I was young left me with this financial hack, and he said that wealthy people think about the total cost of something when they're purchasing it. And he said that broke people think just about the monthly minimum payment that they have to do to be able to have what they want. And that's something that's always stuck with me, because this is what I found. When I ask what the total cost of something is, I'm asking the question, is the pain of this total payment worth it? Because when I'm asking just what the minimum payment is, I'm asking, is the pain of this monthly payment tolerable? And I've always found that when I'm only looking at the monthly payment, I'll find ways to be able to fit things into my budget that should have never been there in the first place. As you're asking this question, should I buy a car? Should I lease the car? And no matter what, this is my encouragement to you, is to crunch the numbers. Look at what you'll pay in the long run for the vehicle and what you're gonna pay over the 3 years of that lease, and ask yourself, is it worth me paying X number of dollars to potentially walk away with nothing in my hands? And so for you, you need to be able to do that math. You need to ask, is it worth it for you in the long run? But here's my encouragement. Do the math and make sure that you're not putting yourself in a financial bind just to have a brand new shiny car or have the thing that you think you've always wanted. Do the math, and I encourage you, think about purchasing that car that's maybe 2, 3, or 4 years older than maybe what you wanted, so you don't have to deal with all the depreciation. And lastly, if you're not subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button and stay tuned in, as next week we're gonna be diving into investing and how to begin your investing journey. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Peace.